As a comic book collector who gets most, if not all, of my back issues from the dollar bins, these are easily the most expensive comics I have ever purchased. Check it out. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's video. I've been collecting comic books since 1987, and way back when I started collecting, I first got into Transformers, which was under Marvel at the time, but pretty quickly after that, I expanded my interest into the X-Men titles, and pretty much since then, they have been my favorite Marvel-related team. My interests have expanded beyond that since then, but I still come back to that core that X-Men is one of my favorite things to read and collect. And the books that I'm going to show you today are X-Men related. And like I said in the intro, these are the most expensive X-Men books I have ever purchased, which is significant to say that on my channel because most of what I show you are dollar bin hauls and 50-cent hauls and quarter hauls and all kinds of crazy cheap deals that I get for the back issues that I'm collecting. But I focus on those kinds of hauls, not just because they're great deals, but because that's how I collect the majority of my back issues. I don't want to spend $5, $10, $20, $50, $100 on a single issue comic. I like finding as much as I possibly can in those dollar bins, and I've been pretty lucky over the years to find quite a few significant things, but you can't find everything in the dollar bins as much as I'd like to believe you could. And so I do want to show you the books, but also want to tell you a little bit about how I got to that point of pulling the trigger on these books and why did I decide to buy these most expensive books that I've ever bought. Well, let's rewind back to 1987 when I first started collecting. Like many collectors, I got introduced to comics through what was current at the time. When I got into the X-Men, there were not nearly as many titles as there are today, believe it or not, but I jumped in on the Uncanny X-Men right around the Inferno event or just before that. And then that expanded to include X-Factor. I remember Excalibur, and that was a title where I was able to jump on right from the very beginning with issue #1. And that felt super cool to get a #1 in an X-Men related book. And then I did dabble in the New Mutants, though that was really much more towards the end of that first volume. And then there were things like Wolverine and his first ongoing, and you get the idea. They did really rapidly increase the number of titles related to the X-Men because they were so popular, but there were still only a handful when I first started collecting. But my focus was really around the current things that were coming out. Now, I did dabble a little bit in the back issues at the time, but really what happened first was that I drifted away from comics in around 1995, 96. So in X-Men terms, that was just after the Age of Apocalypse. And then it was a really long time before I came back to the X-Men specifically. It wasn't until 2015 that I got pulled back into the X-Men books. And there again, it was because of a new title that was launching these all new X-Men. And I was intrigued by the story there, the premise of what was going on. And I thought, hey, I want to give this a try. But similar as well to many other collectors, it wasn't just about the new things at this point. I also wanted to go back and start to fill in those back issues that I was missing, primarily around the era from when I first started collecting. But then there was also the piece of me that said, you know, there's a lot of stories, a lot of issues and titles and creative runs and really cool stuff that I want to add to my collection that happened well before I started buying new comic books. And so I dove in kind of headfirst into the deep end and was collecting as many of the new things as I possibly could, but then diving into those back issue bins and trying to fill out kind of more of a library and catalog of those earlier issues. I did set some parameters for myself because there's just way too much to just go in and just try to randomly collect whatever you can get your hands on. So for Uncanny X-Men, for example, I had collected, like I said, roughly the Inferno event through the Age of Apocalypse. So I made a goal to say, you know what, let's try to get issue 200, so a little bit before where I started collecting, all the way to issue 325. So just after or right at the end of when I was collecting in the mid 90s. And then as you fill that in, then you start to stretch those limits a little bit, and you say, maybe I want to go a little bit lower on the low end and I want to go a little bit higher on the high end. So I extended upwards to issue 350. I don't remember where I went down to in the 100s, but you get the idea. And then ultimately where that got, and for the longest time where my goal sat, was to have everything from issue 143 on the low end to issue 544 on the high end. The reason for those numbers, 544, because that represented the final issue in the volume, so a very logical breaking point there. It's the end of the series. But I chose 143 also because it's a pretty natural breaking point, primarily because anything you go for lower than issue 143, you tend to start to see the price tag really go up significantly. And I got lucky enough that pretty much everything that I needed between 143 and 544, I have been able to, over the last 10 years, fill in through pretty much the dollar bins. Now, that may seem a little surprising because there are some keys in that run, but most of those keys I got because I got lucky enough to buy them new when they came out, like the first appearance of Gambit, for example. I only have that because I bought it when it came out. Otherwise, I'd probably be buying a facsimile and I wouldn't be paying up for that book. But had 143 to 544, and I will give you the little teaser now that the books you're going to see today, I think I said they're X-Men related already, but they do dip lower than that issue 143. So I have gone back further now into lower numbered issues and picked up some of those. But what I thought would be fun to share with you are some of the ways that you could scratch that itch of getting exposure to those stories or getting even print copies of those stories without having to go all the way to buying originals and paying up. Even if you get a good deal, you're still going to pay a chunk of change for some of those earlier issues. And so kind of leading up to the big reveal of what were the books that I bought, I want to show you some of those alternate ways that you can get those stories and still enjoy them and still have them in your collection. The first and easiest way, I would say, is digitally. And that's exactly how I read a lot of those early X-Men stories for the very first time. Several years back, I got a subscription to Marvel's digital service called Marvel Unlimited, and I used that to expose myself to the first 142 issues of X-Men / Uncanny X-Men. This is how I read originally all the Silver Age books, and then up through the relaunch with the all new, all different X-Men, and then all the way through Days of Future Past. Again, that line there after 142, because 143 on, I had those in single issue format that I was able to get pretty inexpensively across the board. So I wanted to be able to read those early issues as well, not just start at 143. So read all those first 142 digitally. Another way you can get those and add the benefit of having a print copy of each of those issues is through other reprint titles. And for these, I'm going to focus primarily on the relaunch of X-Men with the all new, all different X-Men, and not focus on the Silver Age X-Men from the first 66 issues when they were originally coming out. But to get the all new, all different X-Men in print and without paying up tons of money to have those, probably the best and easiest way to do that is through the classic X-Men reprint series. This is a series that ran for 110 issues in total, and it reprints issues 94 through 206 of the Uncanny X-Men series, with only 4 exceptions. I know that issues 141 and 142 are 2 of those exceptions, the Days of Future Past, and then the others are, I want to say 106 and 110. But I don't know why Marvel did not reprint those issues in the classic X-Men series, but for whatever reason, they didn't. But aside from those four, you can get a complete collection of 94 to 206 in print format. And I should say, Giant Size X-Men #1, which was featured in that very first issue of Classic X-Men. Now, on top of this being a much more affordable way to collect these, I would argue you could make a case that this is an even better way to collect these stories than getting the originals. That may sound crazy. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, and probably most significantly, that in the first 46 issues of Classic X-Men, there are backup stories that were added to the back of each issue. Those stories were written by Chris Claremont, and they count as far as being canonically accurate and real. So they're not just like Elseworlds type stories or what if stories. They do count. They flesh out the context of what was going on in their world at the time a little bit more, gives you better understanding and background on some of the relationships. So really, to have the complete story, you've got to have not only the originals, you've got to have those backup stories. And the only way to get those are through the Classic X-Men series, or if you happen to have the Classic X-Men Omnibus, which is not currently in print. Those are the only ways to get those. So in that way, I'd say it's an even more complete way to have the story than having the original issues. Some other things that make the Classic X-Men line so appealing are the covers. I don't know, hopefully you've appreciated some of the covers that you're seeing here. Many of the first the early issues up into even, is this one here one? Not this one, but the first 20 some issues have covers by Arthur Adams, and he's just done a fantastic job with those. So you get new covers by a great artist on these classic stories, and a lot of times they did print the original cover on the inside of the back cover, I want to say, or somewhere in the issue you'd still get a re-presentation of that original cover, so you'd get that included. But you get the reprint, they're much cheaper, you got backup material that counts, and then you got really cool covers by Art Adams. So arguably a very good and even better way to collect these stories. And a lot of these early issues had artwork on the back, and now that these are kind of bagged differently, you'll be able to see that for some of these. I am going to show you the first 46 issues here, because that is the part of the run that encompasses the early part of the Claremont run on Uncanny X-Men and takes us up through the Days of Future Past. It's also fun when you look at these to try to guess from the cover which issue is being reprinted based on the alternate cover that you get on the Classic X-Men issue. But extra art, extra stories, cool covers, all kinds of reasons to be collecting the Classic X-Men series. Let's keep plugging away through here. It does get into the Dark Phoenix saga, one of, if not the most famous X-Men story of all time. I think this one just has an ad on the back, so no more back cover art, but I'll still show you the covers here. Here's one. This one is 133. Is what that one must be reprinting there. But you get the complete Dark Phoenix saga reprinted. And for a very long time, this was the way that I had chosen to collect the all new, all different era of X-Men. 137 there, it's got to be, with Cyclops and Marvel Girl on the moon there. This is the way I was going to collect these issues because of all the reasons I just stated. And then it's only been recently that that's changed. So I'm going to finish showing you these last couple. Oh, I do have doubles of some of these, but not true doubles. Like this one here, I've got a direct and a newsstand. I didn't mean to show you the cover twice, but that's why you're seeing two copies of some of these, because not a true duplicate when you have a newsstand and a direct. And because it's the X-Men, I have a hard time not getting the alternate cover when I can find both. Here we have with issue 46, a couple of things happen here. First of all, this is issue 140 that gets reprinted in here. So the last of that, in my mind, that kind of closes the chapter on that run of the X-Men. I kind of draw a line between Giant Size X-Men #1 and then issue 94 all the way through 142. But because 141 and 142 are not collected in here, 140 is the last one. And then with issue 47, this is issue 143. And it's kind of a funny place to make a break in my mind, because issue 143 is actually the last issue of the Claremont Byrne collaboration. So really 143 should be bracketed in that earlier portion of the run that I was talking about, but it was an easy book for me to get. I got it about 5 years ago and I got it in a dollar bin. So there's a copy there. I think it's valued a little bit higher than that now, but it's kind of surprising, I guess, that it doesn't have more value since it is the last issue of their collaboration. It's cool that it's a Christmas issue as well. I always like Christmas covers. But I guess it is kind of floating out there as an issue because with 140, like I said, you've rounded out the Dark Phoenix saga. You have Cyclops leave the team. You got some changes happening. Then you get this kind of parentheses story with the Days of Future Past. And then you just have the one issue. And then you get a new artist and the run continues from there. So I guess one could maybe argue 143 should be in the later run or the earlier. Doesn't really matter. But for whatever reason, in my mind, I've made that break there. The last thing I want to point out to you regarding this title is that with issue 46, you also get this change. You see there, the title actually changed. In 45, it's still Classic X-Men. In 46, it shifts to X-Men Classic. And after this, you no longer get backup stories anymore. Starting here with issue 47, I think it's with 47, no more backup stories. It just continues on just as a traditional reprint series all the way through Unbroken to issue 206. But again, this was how I was primarily, and still am primarily, focused on collecting the all new, all different era of X-Men in print format, and can be a great alternate way for anybody really to collect those issues without having to go crazy and spend tens or hundreds of dollars on individual issues. Another way that you could get it, though it's not complete, it would be in the form of other kinds of reprints. One of them is this right here. This is True Believers. This is a line of issues that Marvel is not doing anymore, but they were great for the main reason that these were complete reprints, but they cost only $1 cover price. That is a fantastic way to incentivize people to want to collect those older issues that would be otherwise maybe even unachievable for most people's budgets. But because I can tell you right now, this is not one of the books that you're going to see at the end of this haul, and likely not a book that I will ever own, because you're talking thousands of dollars to get a copy of this. And I at this point in my life, I don't see me ever being in a position where I'm going to spend that kind of money on a single issue comic. I will never say never, but I'm hard pressed to see me doing that. So to get this for $1 is fantastic. It does have the True Believers banner on top there, which if you're looking for the original does detract a little bit. The other thing about this is the only ads in here are on the inside of the covers, and they're not reprints, they're new ads. But otherwise you get no ads in here. So you just get a true recreation of that story. So that's a nice way to get that as a cheap alternative. This is issue 101, another True Believers issue that I picked up. And then there were other types of reprints. For example, here's issue 133. I think this issue was originally packaged with an action figure, but I found that in a dollar bin, and I thought that was a pretty cool pickup. And again, you're not going to get this for every issue from this era, just for certain ones, but still, it's an alternate way to get some of those issues. And then the last alternative I'll share with you as a way to get this era of X-Men without completely breaking the bank is the omnibus format. And I only have one of the two volumes from this era. I currently only own volume 2 because this is the only one that was in print when I decided to go this route. This collects really the second half of the all new, all different X-Men run. You can see on the back here the covers that are included in this. But for retail of $125, you can get what would cost you thousands otherwise to buy all of those single issues. And then you get it all in one nice hardcover, really attractive volume, oversized artwork. You get, pretty sure, yeah, letters pages are in here. You don't get advertisements, but you do get additional material in the back with some original art and alternate covers and original covers and things like that. So those are pretty cool. And this one even has the covers from the classic X-Men series. So Marvel liked them enough as well to represent them in here. So a lot of cool benefits to having the omnibus. And again, to get so many stories in one volume, so much cheaper than buying all of those things individually. And for the most part, like I said, that's how I had approached collecting those issues prior to issue 143, because again, any individual issue was just going to cost a lot more than what I was going to find in the dollar bins. Well, last year I got together with a friend of mine who also has a comic book collection. It's just a small collection from when he was a kid. And we went through it together and cataloged it and organized it. And I was helping him because he was thinking about selling it. And I was going to help him try to maximize that value and sell that off and just kind of help get him in a good position for that. And I actually did a video highlighting all of those books that you can go back. I'll put a link down below if you want to check that out. But that was a huge blast for me because it was giving me an opportunity to handle and to see books that some of which I had in my collection, but many of which I did not. And one of the things he had as a highlight was most of that early, all new, all different X-Men run. And as I looked at those books, that was when I first started wondering, maybe I'd like to buy some of these from him because A, they're books that I really want. B, they would probably be, relatively affordable because his stuff wasn't graded. Like he didn't have like 9.8s of anything. So they were higher middle grade kind of books. So they wouldn't be the top of the market pricing. And then they also had the sentimental piece as well. I mean, sure, any of us could go on eBay and buy any of these books any day of the week and get whatever condition we want, provided that money's not a factor. But for me, I like not only the books, I like the story that goes with the books. And so buying books from him that were his childhood comic books would mean more to me than paying the same price or even a better price from somebody that's just a random online seller or even at a comic book show or a sale or something like that. And so that was the first time I started entertaining this idea of, maybe I'd like to get some of those books, even though they cost more than what I typically buy, just because of all those reasons I just said. Well, I didn't buy any at the time. And then fast forward to this year, and I was getting ready for a show earlier in the year called SpringCon. And I was looking at pictures online advertising that event. And at one of them, I saw one of those earlier X-Men books on somebody's wall display and had a really good price on it. And I thought, wow, maybe I'd be willing to pull the trigger on that book. And then I flashed back and remembered, wait a second, if I'm going to spend that kind of money on that book from that seller, maybe I should revisit the books that my friend Mike has and see if there's some of those that I want to buy from him instead. And so that's what I did. And now we're finally at the moment that I'm going to show you the books that I bought that dip below that issue 143. And are books that I wanted to pull the trigger on. Okay, the first one I'm going to show you is X-Men number 136. This is from the Dark Phoenix saga. This is also the first appearance of Jean Grey's sister, Sarah. And I think this was part 8 of the Dark Phoenix saga. And just a really cool John Byrne cover. And yeah, just one that he had. It was a reasonable price. And it was a great cover. I mean, you really can't go wrong with anything from the Claremont and Byrne era of X-Men. There are some books that are super pricey, but this was one of the more affordable books that I was able to add to my collection and expand my Uncanny X-Men, or dip it down into a little bit lower numbers there. So super, super happy to have added that one. Another thing I'll point out to you, if you remember watching some of my earlier videos around bags and boards, I've done some videos on the OPP line of bags from Comic Pro line. This was not planned, but I do have a pack of bags right here. These are bags that I started buying, gosh, it was a couple years ago now. But one of the questions that we all had when we first started using bags from this company were, how well do they hold up compared to polypropylene or polyethylene or Mylar? And they look really nice, and they're probably most comparable to Mylar when you get them out of the bag. But you can see in this is still the OPP bag, but you can see that there's some waviness on the bag there, the light picking it up across the title and everything. So unlike Mylar, it does not hold up, and it does get wavy. This is similar to polypropylene. This is what a standard bag that you get your comic shops is going to do. But I just thought I'd point that out, since these were books that I did rebag and board with him a year ago, and a year later they are wavy, and they've just been in his house, not in an attic, not in a basement, just in kind of ambient conditions. So just interesting to point that out, that OPP bags from Comic Pro line, they are the cheapest thing out there when you buy them on sale, but they're not perfect. So there's issue 136. The next one I got, and this was the book that first caught my attention. This is the one I saw on a wall for a really good price and got me thinking maybe I'd like to buy that. And then I directed my thoughts to Mike, and this is 137. Such a classic cover there with Jean and Scott on the moon. This is the final part of the Dark Phoenix saga. This is where it all ends. This is a double-sized issue, had a 75-cent price tag on it. And gosh, if I could change one thing about my early collecting habits from the mid to late 80s, I wish I was into these earlier back issues then, because it would have been a lot cheaper than it was now. And I still got a really good deal. I have no complaints about the price. Very happy with what I paid for these books, and really happy to have some of these most famous X-Men stories added into my collection, or at least the end of it, at least the Dark Phoenix saga final part there. The next one I want to show you, I just figured I'd show you because it's in order, but believe it or not, this is not a book I bought from Mike. This is a book I bought for $1, I want to say 5 years ago. This was in a dollar bin, and there's really nothing wrong with it. It's got a few condition issues, but should not be a dollar book in anyone's mind. This is Uncanny X-Men number 138. This is when Scott leaves the team, and I can't believe it that I got it for $1. Even then, this was the first issue that I ever got below 143, and I found it in a dollar bin. Now, I don't expect to ever find any of these other issues in a dollar bin, but there still are surprises. So be looking in those dollar bins. You never know what you'll find. I found actually several issues of X-Men at that time in those dollar bins, and it's when I got really, really close to completing that first goal of having 143 to 544. But there's issue 138 found in a dollar bin, and so I figured, yeah, that'd just be fun to show you. And then you can tell we're kind of going in order here, so we'll continue that. Kitty Pryde, one of my favorite X-Men ever, and so I wanted to get something that was significant to her. This is issue number 139. This is when she becomes a character of Sprite and actually joins the team. So very, very happy to add that one to my collection. And again, it's in really nice condition here. I also think, oh, actually, isn't this is the first time Wolverine gets that yellow and brown costume? So there's key significance for that as well. But there's issue 139. And then here is one more, issue 140. So again, issue 136 all the way here through issue 140. Not a huge key as far as X-Men keys go, but still just about everything through this era is considered a key for some reason or another, even if it's just for iconic cover art. But yeah, issue 140. So that was really nice to have this little set of books, 136 now through 140 in an unbroken run. Well, I've got two more books to show you, and you might be able to guess what they are because of where we've been going with the previous issues and because I'm saving them for last. And yes, I did go all the way and pull the trigger on two of the most famous X-Men covers and stories of all time, Days of Future Past in X-Men 141 and 142. And I still am almost in disbelief that I own copies of these because I just never thought I would. I never thought I'd get them. I never thought I'd pull the trigger, even having the money to do that. I just didn't think I'd own originals of these. And now I own them, and I'm really happy with the condition. And I got them from a good friend of mine, and so they'll always have that sentimental value as well, knowing that these were part of his childhood collection. And now the collector part of me is also satisfied because now my Uncanny X-Men collection starts all the way down to issue 136. I do have a couple issues lower than that, but as far as a continuous run, it goes all the way from 136 all the way through to the final issue 544, and I'm very, very happy with that. Will I go lower? That is the next question. Right now, I'm not planning to. Issue 135, that's a even more expensive book than some of these. I don't know, maybe. My friend has been really slow on selling his books. So it could be that I've just got a long-term plan there where I can every once in a while, when I saved up a little money, I could say, hey, can I buy this one? And I'll offer you this much money and see if he says yes. And maybe we'll continue to chip away at this. So you might see another video showing some lower numbered issues still, but that's going to be a little while. All right, that's going to do it for me. And that's going to do it for this small haul of the most expensive X-Men books I have bought to date. Who knows what the future holds? I do hope you saw something that you liked. And if you did, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, then why don't you hit the subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you'll know the next time I upload a video. Now, if you're not quite ready for the YouTube fun to stop, I have hand-selected a couple videos here for you to check out. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.